Hello, and welcome to episode 76 of Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. I'm one of your hosts, Sean, here with my other host and brother-in-law, Sam. Sam, we've got stickers still.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're a listener, we have our first piece of merch, which is a sticker. And they are free to you. So if you would like one, hop on Facebook, send us a message with your address, and I will personally pay for the postage to get you your Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things sticker. Or you can send us an email at elvesringsnerdythings@gmail.com. There is no "and" in our email handle, or whatever you want to call it. And now that that's out of the way, how are you, Sam?
Oh, I'm good. Thank you. I'm just curious what the postage is for mailing a sticker.
Whatever an envelope or one letter is.
Yeah, it's like the sticker weighs not, but like it's like a piece of air. It's nothing.
Yeah. So if you get a sticker from us, I pledge this moment, while supplies last, I will write you a little poem.
Oh, there you go, people.
And I will also sprinkle some of my cologne in there, so it'll smell like me. You'll have my words, and you will have a free sticker.
This offer is getting stronger and stronger.
Yeah, we're not talking about my cologne. Actually, one quick thing about my cologne. I've been wearing the same cologne for quite a while. It's called Mahogany Woods from, I think it's not Bed Bath & Beyond. What's that?
Probably not Bed Bath & Beyond. It could be. I think they sell cologne.
What's the mall store where they sell soaps and...
Oh.
Bath and Beauty Works.
There you go. I was going to say like the candle shop, but it's basically the same thing.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, they do sell candles there too. So it's a cologne from Bath and Body Works that they don't sell anymore, that specific fragrance. And I looked it up the other day because I was like, oh yeah, I'm kind of running low on this one that I've had for like 10 years because I don't use it that often. You can buy one bottle of it now for like $400.
How big of a bottle?
I don't know the ounces, but it's like the normal cologne amount, but for $400 because they don't sell it anymore, apparently.
That's wow. Should have invested in some cologne. I got a question for you. Do we have a meat update? Some weeks back, you made Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things mead. I think we got one update, and there's been some stuff on social, but can we get something for the podcast?
Yeah, we are at the point where I'm ready to record an update episode.
Oh, fantastic.
So after this episode of Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things, episode 76, 77 will be our season 1 finale episode of House of the Dragon. And I think we can forecast maybe episode 78 being our Mead Part 2 update.
All right, folks, you heard it here first. Episode 78 of Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things will be Mead Part 2. And then, we don't have to talk about the vagaries of interstate commerce and whatnot with the shipping the mead, but we'll have to arrange a tasting for our loyal Earntings and me as well, because I obviously will not be there to assist with the bottling or the decanting or the back fermentation or the tasting.
Well, we could also just wait if the podcast exists in October. If you come out for the Michigan game,
that's true.
We could record an actual tasting episode then when you're in the great state of Washington. But we'll see how it pans out.
All right.
Well, so as I said, we are indeed here for House of Dragon. If you've been following along, we are covering season 1 in preparation for season 2, which comes out in mid-June. And today we are recapping and talking about episodes 7 and 8 of season 1.
All right. So I'll start off with episode 7, titled Driftmark. King Viserys and his court attend Lady Laena's funeral in Driftmark. Rhaenyra and Daemon reunite and are physically intimate. Meanwhile, Viserys fails to reconcile with Daemon. Prince Aemond claims Vhagar as his dragon, causing an altercation with his cousins and nephews in which Lucerys slashes Aemond's eye with a knife. As revenge, Queen Alicent lunges at Lucerys with Viserys' Valyrian steel dagger. Rhaenyra blocks Alicent but injures herself. After claims that Rhaenyra's sons are bastards, Viserys decrees anyone questioning their legitimacy will be punished. Later, former Hand of the King Otto Hightower assures Alicent they will prevail, while Rhaenyra and Daemon unite against Alicent and her family. To continue the true Velaryon lineage, Princess Rhaenys suggests that Lord Corlys pass his title through his granddaughter Baela by marriage to Prince Lucerys, as Laenor has not sired any children. Sir Carl appears to murder Laenor, leaving behind a charred body. Daemon and Rhaenyra privately marry in the old Valyrian Dragonlord tradition to perpetuate the Targaryen bloodline. Meanwhile, Laenor, having faked his death, escapes Driftmark with Carl. That was episode 7. Sean, what did you think?
I don't want to beat a dead horse with my complaints of everything that can go wrong does go wrong.
Yeah.
So we have that factor, and that factor plays in much more in the next episode, in episode 8.
That's one of our discussion points.
To the extreme. In this episode, at least, I wasn't as bothered by my overarching problem with season 1. I liked that Laenor kind of got his happy ending at the expense of his parents. Corlys and Rhaenys definitely think their son is dead. And it's an ingenious way to go about it. Having some body that they found, throw it in a fire, burn it from the waist up.
So they didn't find it. Daemon created it. He killed that dude in the stairwell.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I was thinking about, because I remember from the first time watching that they fake his death. Like, you still feel terrible for the random, like, and then they have to explain the disappearance of that dude.
Yeah. Well, it backs up my Daemon's not a good guy.
Yeah, for sure.
He's pretty much a bad guy.
All right, so do you have anything else specifically on the Laenor front? Because I have a discussion point here that I'd like to get into.
No, just that good for Laenor.
Yeah, good for Laenor that he had a happy ending. I think my issue is that, similar to our discussion point last week and the relationship between Laenor and Rhaenyra, and we don't see enough of it. We don't see them trying to produce heirs. They talk to that in this episode. Rhaenyra has a whole conversation with Daemon, and then Laenor and Rhaenyra have a conversation, and I kind of don't buy it to a certain extent. And then he has this revelation that he wants to be better, that he wants to be there for her, that he wants to be supportive. And you can see, and my interpretation of that conversation and Rhaenyra's contributions and comments, she was kind of hinting at him, like, letting him go, right? Like, you could see when she was talking to him, she wanted, to set up either the fake death or some sort of divorce or something. Because at this point, she's already slept with Daemon and she's thinking about the future.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, he's like, oh, I'm going to double down and I'm going to be here with you. And it's like, it's just another, and then we don't have that conversation that happened afterwards of, well, you know how you said you wanted to be here for me? Well, now what I really need to do is for you to fake your death, for you to leave and never come back. And the result of that being that both your parents think that you're dead. And by the way, we just buried your sister. So it's just like, it's so consequential that Laenor was a willing participant that it kind of wasn't, that conversation wasn't enough for me. And I would say that, and that is a small imperfection. Not that this episode is perfect, but it doesn't destroy the episode, but it, like I said, I think the word I used last episode was hollow, leaves it a little hollow for me.
Would you call that a blemish on the episode?
I was going to say blemish. I was going to say pimple.
Okay.
On the face of this episode.
I like blemish more than pimple.
It's a boil. Yeah.
And even with that conversation that you mentioned where Rhaenyra talks about the struggles with Laenor to Daemon, we've said this in the past, and you in particular have said this in the past on other properties. Don't tell me, show me.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just another one of those. They're shrinking the season, or they're shrinking the plot into one season. So instead of having an episode or a part of an episode where they show you these struggles and interactions between her and Laenor, instead we have a 30-second conversation
Mm-hmm.
which doesn't impact you as the viewer near as much as showing me the story instead of just telling me the story.
Like I I don't know. And I can't say if this thought just popped into my mind, but what if we had, and it would have required an episode in the intermediate timeline between their wedding and the birth of her children. But what if you had some indication that they were trying, and then it wasn't the fact that Lenore couldn't perform, but maybe he's sterile or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's some explanation of why, despite their best efforts, they really just cannot conceive. Because it's obviously she can obviously have children. They seem to have attempted to sleep together. So are we supposed to think that he's, shooting blanks or something like that? And you could have seen, they could have demonstrated the desperation maybe that they get to, and that could be a
Yeah.
point of strain. And then she, maybe that somehow leads her to get with Harwin or whatnot. But they didn't. I don't think that was, if that was what they're intending for, it didn't come through.
I don't know if they ever really explained it. My interpretation of it has always been because he's gay, he just was never able to perform
Yeah.
that duty. But again, they never tell you, so then it's up to the viewer to just come up with that plot in their head
Yeah.
and fill in the blanks. And I don't like when writers do that. It's okay to an extent.
And you got a sense of how understanding Rhaenyra is, both in the previous episodes and in this one too, where she's like, some people like duck, some people like goose. That's fine. Let's do our duty. And then in this episode, I think Lenore says something like, "I wish I wasn't made this way," and she's like, "Don't say that." And she kind of, you know, affirms him in his identity. And I could have seen that sentiment manifesting itself earlier when there were struggles. And
Mhm.
then maybe, tangentially related to this, have you seen Mary, Queen of Scots?
No.
No. So this came out, I can't remember exactly when, but it's Saoirse Ronan as Mary, Queen of Scots. And it's the story of her kind of being exploited by various men in the Scottish nobility, and her conflict with her half brother, obviously the conflict between Scotland and England. And I think Queen Elizabeth is played by Margot Robbie. It was a good movie, interesting. Anyway, in that they portray,
Yeah,
and
I
I
was
don't
gonna
know,
say, what are you getting at?
sorry. In that movie, they portray Mary, Queen of Scots, is technically her second husband, but the one who eventually fathers James, who would become James, the first king of England and Scotland united. They show James's father as being gay, and Mary like kind of takes control of their relationship, their sexual relationship. And it's a very it was a very interesting scene demonstrating how a woman who knows that she needs to produce an heir in order to strengthen her own position is going to be assertive and potentially even dominant in that encounter. And I could have imagined you Rainier is the type of person where you could see something like that happening, where you would just see more of an effort on both of their parts instead of it being talked about years later. So go watch that movie. It's good. Not just for that scene, for many of the other ones.
So your first point that you wrote down, I'm happy that you wrote down this as a discussion point because I noted it immediately when it happened. Viserys calling Alicent Emma,
Yes.
which just brings me full circle back to Viserys is the problem for the entire series, for this entire
Mm-hmm.
season. He married someone like immediately out of grief. This tells me he probably picked the wrong person if he's calling his new wife his dead wife's name.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it could be also signs of his bodily ailments finally reaching his brain
Mm-hmm.
and like his aging and becoming senile and all of that. But because it looks like he almost kind of recognizes it when he does it, to me, it kind of feels like a slip.
Like a Freudian slip, as opposed to this straight up dementia. Like he just
Yeah.
gets used to it. Yeah. It was it's it is an interesting, quick little line that sets up some of the conversations in the next episode, and it highlights that. And this is something where you could see the very subtle reactions on the other actors, the other characters had. And I think it was it Sir Westerling who like very quickly calls Queen Alicent by name or something like that to kind of like gently remind. It's like, oh, you mean Alicent? You're the wife that you've had for the past, 15 years or whatever, however long it's been. Yeah, no, that was good. And we don't get a ton of the physical degradation in Viserys like we will in the next episode, but now we're starting to see, yeah, like you said, mentally either dementia or confusion or Freudian slip.
Next point, number 3 that you would like to discuss.
Number 3 or number 2?
Well, we already talked about the 5th.
Right. I'm talking, but so I'll just go with the
your second point on your list, but our third point that we're talking about.
We have a list, people.
Sam is not doing the math in his head while we're talking.
We jumped to the 5th point, but it was because that was of a lot of interest.
Just a bit. So you can't multitask. That's okay.
I can walk and chew bubblegum.
What's the point?
Otto is very observant, which is a minor observation, but something that you are allowed to do on a rewatch when you generally understand the plot, you get to see the more subtle things. And like you see Otto kind of putting things together. He observes Rhaenyra and Daemon specifically, and you get a sense like he knows exactly what's going on between Rhaenyra and Daemon. He sees them talking. He sees them maybe walking off on the beach together, and he definitely sees them coming into the hall after the kid fight. He sees them coming in together, and we're all made aware that Sir Laenor was not attending or not with Rhaenyra as he probably should have been. And obviously we know Otto. And then in this scene, you finally get that, this episode rather, at the end, you get that conversation between Otto and Alicent, when, he says, finally tonight, I saw that you have what it takes to win this, when they have their physical altercation. So I enjoyed Otto in this episode, him being just an observant person. And he also intervenes and goes like to pick drunk Aegon up off the ground and kick him and get him to go back into his room, whatever. So you see him as this maybe a little bit less hidden of an operator as he has been.
Just reminds me of Tywin Lannister. Like everybody else was afraid to confront Joffrey, but Tywin still treated him like his grandson. And there was like that dynamic there, and very much the same thing. I mean, he and Alicent, I think, still view Aegon as the heir to the throne. And the way that Otto still interacts with him, even though he knows he's the heir, like keeping that dynamic of, I'm your patriarch, instead of, one day I will be your hand or something like that. So I like that dynamic. And I don't know the guy's name off the top of my head who plays Otto, but he does a very good job of making me dislike his character, which is a testament to him as an actor. And I always felt the same way about the kid who played Joffrey, where I hated Joffrey. And I feel bad for the actor because he's just doing his job, and he's doing his job really, really well. But then people on the street like dislike him because he played Joffrey so well and all of that stuff. And I feel this, not to the extent of Joffrey for sure, but Otto in particular, I find him kind of sleazy and a little bit of a scumbag, and playing the political game very well. And it's just a testament to the actor, I think.
I would agree with you. I think he's a Welsh actor. I think it's like Rhys Ifans or something like that. It's not how it's pronounced exactly, but he was the roommate in Notting Hill. He was Hugh Grant's roommate, which is because I think he plays a lot of characters like that. I believe he was Rasputin in the Kingsman prequel. Did you ever see that?
Yes, I did. I think you're right. But his role in Notting Hill, I always remember when he puts the scuba goggles on and then exhales the smoke from his cigarette,
Yeah.
and then it pours out the scuba mask. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So Otto is great. So let's move on to point number 3, which is Helene and her prophetic insights. So we get the fulfillment of one of her prophecies from earlier in the season where Aemond is complaining about not having a dragon. And she says he'll have to close an eye in order to win a dragon. And that happens. Aemond, in the process of his fight with his cousins and nephews after claiming Vagar, his eye is put out. And then we also have her during the funeral playing with a spider. And she's saying things like the hand moves the loom. Dragons are like threads of black and threads of green. Dragons of flesh weave dragons of flame, and things like just, very colorful prophetic language. But you get the idea of, the hand is Otto. Otto is manipulating things. You have the dance of the dragons, this kind of this imagery in mind about kind of the linking back to the idea of tapestries. You have the tapestry of this dance being woven prophetically. Anyway, but then also during that time, her betrothed older brother calls her weird, and Aemond sticks up for her.
Yeah. Aemond goes through a huge character change between episodes 7 and 8, and I don't know if I like it or believe it. It seems it's too jarring for me. Like the character of Aemond that we have now, who has the moment in this episode where he looks like he's going to console his cousin because he knows, he knows these kids are strongs. And there's the moment where they're like standing across from each other over the brazier, and it looks for a moment like he's going to console, and then he ends up walking away. There's times in this episode where they paint him to be a a a more caring individual because of the trauma that he's gone through, that he can kind of relate to other people when they're experiencing trauma. And then all of a sudden in episode 8, like I understand him going to get Vagar and all of that stuff because he needs a dragon and there's an open dragon. So he goes and does it. And I understand the fight that ensues afterwards, but to go from where we leave off in episode 7 to where we find him in episode 8, this is again one of those issues of time jumps where 6 years pass between episodes 7 and 8, and there is a huge character change and character development in Aemond particularly. And without any context as to what's happened, they hint at some things, but I don't think the hinting does enough to actually explain why he's developed the way he has. And then it just seems jarring to me in that episode. And we can talk about it when we get to episode 8 in particular, but
well, so we should continue this conversation because he is being set up as the one of the prime
the main
movers,
villain. Yeah. Depends on your stance.
Yeah, and I would say he's more, I think we would think of him as a villain because he seems to be courting the direct confrontation, especially in future episodes. So in this episode, the thing that I really liked about these scenes with him were post knife fight, when they're all in the Great Hall. Viserys demands, where did you hear that Lucerys and Jacaerys are bastards? And Aemond looks at Alicent and then lies. I think he lies and he says Aegon.
He does, yeah. And but he lingers long enough on Alicent to where Viserys knows.
Exactly. And then, but he doesn't say it publicly. And then Viserys goes to Aegon. And Aegon's like, where did you hear it? And Aegon maybe is lying, but also maybe it's the lie that's the truth. Because he says everybody knows it, right? And I'm sure that it was that his mom probably also told him or said these things, and he's just parroting that. But it's also pretty obvious, and it is kind of the open secret that these kids are bastards. And so, but and then just knowing some of we get all these conversations between Alicent and Aegon specifically. And you have to think that to a certain extent, Aemond is also, he's imbibing the things that Alicent is saying about those kids are bastards. You need to prepare to be king and whatever else. Because if I'm Aemond and I'm hearing that, it's like, okay, well, Aegon is being, yes, he's first in line, but things happen. I could be the king. If these bastards are revealed for who they are. And I think he's basically taking this situation seriously in a way that Aegon is not. And that could contribute to his disposition. And from the beginning, he's also seemed to be a little bit of a dour kid, right? Like he was kind of mopey with his whole dragon thing and the pig that they give him. And he's bullied by his brother, and he doesn't have a good relationship with his nephews. So I could understand how he turns into a little bit of a loner, a little bit of a serious kid, especially when he sees and dislikes what Aegon does with the drinking and the being an unserious person, despite theoretically being king, or should be the king.
I mean, I guess, but in that 6 years, if you showed me the development instead of making us have a conversation about it like this, and be like, well, this is what could have happened in that 6 years to cause this. You just go from episode 7 to episode 8, and then there's that change. And I just would have liked to, throughout this whole first season, just slow down, give me more detail, and show me things instead of making us fill in blanks or just have brief conversations that give us the detail. But the scene that we're talking about, our last note, is part of this scene. It is the confrontation between Alicent and Rhaenyra. Now, I loved Alicent snapping.
Oh, it's great. Yeah.
It was so good. And then I loved the comment Rhaenyra makes where she says, good, everybody can see you for what you are now.
Yeah.
And I was just like, bam, that is
the thing that's like right before that, I think she says like how exhausting it must have been to maintain this facade for so many years or whatever else. It was just, it was so good. And then also
behind her piety or whatever
exactly, and
she uses. Yeah.
And she's got meanwhile, she's got a knife like pointing right at her. Right. So it's such a good scene. And then even the stuff with you get some good Kristen Cole in that scene too, where at first,
oh dude, Alicent, I hate Kristen Cole so much.
I know but he's like, you can see
in a good way, like good job actor, good job writing.
Yes.
I hate this dude.
He's because you get the line where she's like, an eye for an eye, basically, Sir Criston, bring me the eye of Lucerys Valerian. And
you have the head of the Kingsguard looks at him and gives him the look.
Yeah, and then he's like,
are you about to go attack possibly the heir?
And then Cole knows oh no, I'm your sworn protector.
Defender. Yeah,
defender. Like, I'm not your cat's paw.
Yeah.
That was good.
But he still gets held back.
Yes,
like when
he does.
When Alicent goes and attacks Rhaenyra, other Kingsguard prevent Cole from going into the fray. So,
well, they know he has a history.
Yeah, but it's on the side though, and they don't. It's something you could easily miss. Like when that scene happens and Alicent attacks, I didn't notice it the first time, but the second time, you see him like that little scuffle in the bottom right corner, and they're all wearing white cloaks. So it was like, boom, yeah, great.
That was good. And then the final note here, unless you have anything else, is just that that whole scene was very reminiscent of the Game of Thrones season 1 scene with Cersei and Robert Baratheon after Joffrey is bitten by Nymeria. And it's in the middle of the night, and they have Sansa and Arya arguing about what happened, and eventually Cersei demands one of the dire wolves be killed. And it's obviously the parallels aren't exact, but it was reminiscent, had similar feelings, right? And then you also have Robert Baratheon and Viserys are both kind of these viewed as weak, indecisive kings who, don't necessarily do the right thing in all situations. And, Viserys wants to make his family happy and avoid confrontation. And Robert is just, doesn't really want to do the hard decisions either, but he doesn't really care. He used that opportunity to make fun of his son. But you kind of see the parallels between Cersei and Alicent to a certain extent. And I don't think they're all there, but it was a good parallel, I thought.
Yeah. Episode 8. I will give you
right.
a break, Sam, and I'll read this one for you.
Oh, all right.
6 years later, Lord Corlys Velaryon is wounded fighting in the Stepstones. His brother, Sir Vaemond, petitions King's Landing to name him Corlys's heir, proclaiming Rhaenyra's son, Lucerys, illegitimate. Rhaenyra and Daemon return to the capital to defend Lucerys' claim. King Viserys is now bedridden, disfigured, and mentally muddled. Queen Alicent and the King's Hand, Otto Hightower, oversee all royal matters. Alicent covers up Prince Aegon raping a handmaiden. Rhaenyra proposes 2 marriage agreements with House Velaryon to gain Princess Rhaenys' support. She implores Viserys to defend her succession, quoting Aegon the Conqueror's dream about the prince that was promised. As Vaemond's petition is presented at court, Viserys declares Lucerys the Driftmark heir. Daemon beheads Vaemond when he denounces Rhaenyra as a whore and her children bastards. The family appears to reconcile during a feast, but Aemon later incites a fight, insinuating Rhaenyra's 3 sons are bastards. Meanwhile, Alicent's lady-in-waiting Talia regularly provides Daemon's former mistress, Mysaria, with information. Viserys, near death, mutters parts of Aegon the Conqueror's dream, which Alicent mistakenly believes as a reference to Prince Aegon. So, Sam, I'm going to kind of jump in here and just say, this is my problem with the show.
Well, yeah, no, the miscommunication is big. But speaking of miscommunication, I have a couple of nits to pick with this summary, which, by the way, we didn't write. This is pulled from Wikipedia. First of all, Vaemond does not proclaim Rhaenyra's son illegitimate before we have the petition being heard in the courtroom. He goes out of his way to avoid saying that publicly, and there are other reasons cited.
He does to Rhaenys.
Yeah, but I wouldn't call that a proclamation, right? That's not like a public statement. That was something, and even in the moment, she's like, you better be careful. That's treason, what you just said. And so the whole cover story is that the Lord of the Tides should be somebody who's an adult, who has experience with ships and fleets and command. And that's not Lucerys Velaryon. And that was the cover story. And I think because I made a note about how Alicent kind of parrots that idea as her justification, as the public justification for what is basically a slap in the face to Rhaenyra and, an acknowledgement that these children are illegitimate. So that's my first nit. And my second nit is Talia is, what do they say? Lady Alicent's lady-in-waiting Talia regularly provides Daemon's former mistress Mysaria with information. I would say regularly is not established. We only see her
we don't know.
For the first time in this episode doing it. I will say that she gets maybe a little bit more screen time. It's very obvious when she's in the room and when she observes things, but it only becomes clear that she has been a spy or she is spying in this episode. It was not clear in prior episodes.
But then again, I can't argue that point because it's not told to us. So I think one could assume or extrapolate information based off of, I don't think there would be just this one instance that this is probably a network where this person has
for sure
spied multiple times. Now the show doesn't establish that it's a reoccurring thing, but I think it's safe to assume that it probably is.
Yeah, and I think we get confirmation of that in the next episode. I haven't watched it in a while, but I think she's sending signals from a window or something like that. So it's okay, you've clearly established modes of communication.
Yeah,
you're practiced this. Okay, but let's talk about Sean's miscommunication issue. So take it away.
Well, I've pretty much I've
Okay.
I've pretty much said my piece, I think. I think for me it's just like I said last episode, our last episode, episode 75, if miscommunication in season 1 happens a couple of times and those instances like furthered along parts of the plot, no qualm from me. But when the plot is furthered along almost entirely by miscommunication, that's where I start to have a problem. And it culminates with this episode where Rhaenyra is talking to him about the prince that was promised and the prophecy and all of that. And then for some reason, Viserys, like the next day, after being pretty with it for about 24 hours, all of a sudden falls into a stupor and then thinks he's talking to Rhaenyra. And then there's just a miscommunication between Alicent thinking that he's talking about Aegon, and then that leads to what we're going to find in episodes 9 and 10. But after this was like, this is going to be the most frustrating episode for me, the last final scene. And then hopefully there's no miscommunication going forward because everybody's going to hate each other. So from here on out, it should just be this is the plot. There's a civil war. People are fighting each other. Hopefully it's over now.
Can I affirm your dislike of the miscommunicate of the plot being driven forward by miscommunication, but point out that these, I think they have set these things up sufficiently. Specifically, we heard about the Aegon's dream in episode 1 when Viserys names Rhaenyra heir. That was revisited earlier in this episode when Rhaenyra first came back to see Viserys, and you can tell she's kind of doubting whether or not she wants to go through with this whole thing because, as far as she's concerned, like her children are about to be named illegitimate, which would disastrously undermine her position. We've also established that at least once before, Viserys talked to Alicent about a dream that he had. Remember at the hunt where they're talking in front of the bonfire and he's talking about this dream that he had about his son wearing Aegon's crown. So that was not something that I recalled the first time watching, but this time I did because we talked about it when we covered that episode. So Alicent at least has some prior experience with Viserys talking about their son or his son going ascending to the throne.
No, you don't have to say but, because we've already established that based off of the information characters have, their decisions based off of the miscommunication make sense.
Mm-hmm.
So like everything Alicent does from here on out makes sense to me because they have painted it in a way that she would interpret what he says as switching Aegon to being the heir. But what I'm saying is, how many times can you use this plot device
Okay.
to further your plot? I hit a point where I'm just like, I mean, I get it. Yeah, like people don't know how to talk to each other and people misinterpret things because this guy is literally 35 seconds from dying and he's like chemicals in his brain are flooding and making him say things and see things. And
I would also say too that Alicent should probably know that the dude who is like has been incapable for however many years, you should not trust his word when he's obviously like swimming in pre-death delusion.
Yeah, and Milk of the Poppy.
Yes,
and he called you Emma 6 years ago. And like, okay, I'm done. I'm done complaining about
there
that.
Was, and I don't know if it was I think it was earlier in this episode where it's when Rhaenyra comes. I think it's when Rhaenyra comes into his chambers. Maybe it was later when he calls Rhaenyra his only child. Did you catch this?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, and that jumped out to me. I made a note of the quote. I can't remember exactly what scene it was in though, but so again, confusion. but the confusion tends to favor Rhaenyra, right?
Mhm.
It seems confused. It's an incorrect statement, but it reveals the deeper truth that Viserys really never wavered in his support of Rhaenyra once he named her heir,
Or in his love for Emma, because if he's clearly,
or in his love for Emma, and that's his
because if
daughter with
he's,
Emma,
yeah,
right?
if he's saying that I fully support Rhaenyra, he's honoring that whatever the lineage with Emma is was created. So yeah.
Yeah.
So let's cut to that scene where Rhaenyra walks in with Daemon to
Oh
see
yeah.
him pretty much
This
on his
is
deathbed.
well, this is our first glimpse. It's not even the complete glimpse. Not until the dinner do we get the full reveal, but we see the further degradation of Viserys, where he's now got one eye, his teeth have fallen out, his hair is like the few hairs that he has left are long, but he's mostly bald. His face is falling apart. There's a
Mhm.
scene later where his back just is covered in these open wounds. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
And I was just watching Damon's face during all of that. Damon can barely look at him.
And it makes you think that it's definitely been like 6 years since
Mm-hmm.
they've interacted. Otherwise, you would have known that the deterioration was gradual. They both act like this is a very sudden, like they weren't
Mm-hmm.
expecting to see him in this state.
And it, it was it was interesting to me that Damon very obviously could barely look at Viserys, had a hard time speaking to him, but he kind of put a facade on when Allison came into the room and he was being snarky with her about the situation. I think she says something like, "Oh, we act for the king based on his wishes." And he's like, "How do you know?" Through all of the wheezes and groans or something like that. And then
Mhm.
he's kind of making a joke about it. And then he has a comment about Targaryen heraldry being replaced by Faith of the
The
Seven
seven.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's getting a little snarky, but and this is kind of Damon's thing, right? He loves his family, but there's always this
Oh,
challenge
does
with
he
it.
love his family?
And now he's really loving his family. Anyway, so that was anything else from that scene with Viserys in bed, and it's kind of sad too. They walk in, his room is like his model city's covered in cobwebs and he's
Mhm.
all alone.
In the dark. There's
Yeah,
like incense burning.
yeah, to hide the smell from anybody else who has to come in, I'm sure.
Yeah. Next step.
Yeah. Next point. So Aegon raped the handmaid.
He's a shitty man.
He's a very shitty man. Uh,
And you have the subsection of your point. Does Allison kill the maid? No, I do not believe so. I think
you
it
don't
is a
think so?
callback to the abortion tea that was given to Rhaenyra.
Okay. Yeah. I know.
At least that's, again, because nobody tells us anything in this show.
Oh,
That's how I interpreted it.
this is one of those things where if this never pays off, like if it's never revealed that she survived, like we never see her again. Oh, there's this. If we see that same handmaiden again, then we'll know. Okay, she didn't
Mhm.
kill her. That's fine. If we never see her, we probably won't ever see her again. We may at some point get a reference to her being disposed of or something along those. Like maybe Larry's is going to use this as leverage over Allison at some point in the future. Who knows? Um,
I don't think we'll get if unless we get it in episodes 9 and 10. I don't think we're ever going to get it.
no, we might not, but who knows? The one thing that I don't think it's within Allison's character to kill a handmaid. I don't think so. She seems that it seems to be, unfortunately,
She seems genuine when
she seems
she's holding her and consoling her, says she believes her, all of that stuff.
yeah, but then she instantly switches to I'm worried about what other people would, right? Because you have to transition to like, okay, I'm going to console you, but then I also need to get your silence, which takes the form of some cash. But then she has a word. I think the handmaid says something like, I won't tell a soul, or I won't tell anyone, or whatever it is. And she's like, but you've already told me and this person and that person. And she's like, I won't tell anybody else. And then Allison says something along the lines of, I know you won't, which could be reassuring. And it's like, I know you won't, here's the money. But it could also be, I know you won't, here's the money. And I know that you're going to die. So that's why I think there's enough doubt where it was worth talking about, but we can't say for sure.
Yep. I'm in the abortion tea camp.
All right. And then she says to Allison, says to Aegon, "You're no son of mine," which is just an interesting comment because this whole season's drama really hinges around the idea of legitimacy and, whose children are whose. And, we have no doubt that Rhaenyra's children are hers. It's, who's the father. And here we should have no doubt that Alicent's son or Aegon is Alicent's son, but she, rhetorically just owns him. Obviously, it's not going to have any impact on the legitimacy of anything, but it's an interesting thing to say in light of the other royal drama in this episode.
Next up, Vaemond meeting with Otto and Alicent. Alicent vocalizing legitimate reasons to rule in his favor. I mean, yeah, it makes sense. If you are the king, if you rule King's Landing, you want someone who can truly lead your navy, basically, into battle. And with things to come, you would definitely want Vaemond, especially if you were able to get Aegon on the throne. You would rather have someone in Driftmark on your side than have Rhaenyra's son. So, yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense. And then I think Vaemond has this and I would be very gracious, or I would be much in your gratitude or much in your debt or something like that. It's like, okay, we get it, dude. Yeah, you're loyal. But
when he calls the heir to the throne, the current heir to the throne, a whore in public, when he gets beheaded at the jaw, basically, I was not expecting it the first time I watched it. No, I thought he would probably die, especially because at this point, Viserys has made his grand appearance and he shuffles all the way to the throne to hear this case. And then the threat from the last episode was anybody who calls into question the legitimacy, that's a hard word to say, the legitimacy of Rhaenyra's sons, I will have their tongue. And then it pays off perfectly here with the decapitated head, basically, but the tongue is still kind of flapping right there.
It was really good.
And then Daemon's line, he can have his tongue. I'll give you his head or something like that.
Yeah. Keep his tongue or whatever. That was pretty badass. And you kind of knew, well, you can see that point where Vaemon's like, all right, fuck it. I just lost out. But then you also got to remember too, and we do get this kind of somewhat of a touching scene with Rhaenys. And she's very, I have a note about this, but she's a very important character in this episode. But Rhaenys, you think about it from Rhaenys' standpoint. Daemon has now murdered in cold blood in front of everybody her brother-in-law. Daemon and Rhaenyra are both suspected of murdering her son. She holds Daemon, I think she holds him at least partially responsible for the death of her daughter.
Yep.
And Daemon fought in the war that currently, not the current war, but that the conflict that set up her husband's current situation of being wounded and on the verge of death. You got to be like, Rhaenys is probably like, fuck you, man, stop ruining my life.
Yeah, but at the same instance, the future of her children are now tied to
exactly
him and Rhaenyra. So, I mean, what camp would she rather be in? If Alicent and Otto win, I can't imagine there's a bright future for her other nieces.
No,
or granddaughters.
So this is interesting, and I think I want to tie it back to something we talked about earlier, where you've got, before the courtroom scene, the throne room scene rather, you have Rhaenys and Rhaenyra talking in the Godswood. And this is Rhaenyra trying to get Rhaenys on her side. And one of the things that she says, she proposes this dual marriage where both of Rhaenys' granddaughters, who are also Daemon's daughters, will marry the two older sons of Rhaenyra. And I think Rhaenys calls it a desperate and generous offer. And she doesn't give an answer. Or does she clearly decline in that moment, or did she just not give an answer?
No, I don't think she responds, but then she does.
Yes.
In this scene.
Once the die has been cast, it seemed clear that as soon as Viserys walked in the throne room, Rhaenys knew that, okay, this is only going to end in one way. I might as well. I'm not going to go against the king. I'm going to back up. And then, like, yeah, she publicly accepts the marriage offer, and she backs up that Lord Corlys never changed his mind about who he wanted to inherit Driftmark. Mm-hmm. And so she's firmly like in Rhaenyra's camp. It would have been interesting, and this, I want to tie this back into our conversation about Aemon. It would have been interesting if we had gotten more active courting of Rhaenys on the part of Alicent and Otto.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, hey, you have 2 granddaughters. What if we wed one of them to Aemon? Aemon doesn't have a wife, as you know, that could have been a character development point for Aemon, where it's like, no, I don't want to marry anybody. I'm a fighter, I'm a warrior, I am gonna be, a servant of my house. And that doesn't include getting married, kind of like a Brynden Blackfish type character. That would have been interesting, but we didn't get that, and that's fine. But I could have seen that happening.
Mm-hmm. And it would have made that scene more dramatic if you're waiting for Rhaenys to see who she backs.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then she ends up picking Rhaenyra. Yeah. Next up, importance of Rhaenys. So we already did that.
Mm-hmm.
Dinner scene. And this is pretty much the last thing we haven't talked about. So
yeah, so the first thing is this is a small, tiny little throwaway line where we have these like series of toasts, and I think Viserys gives the first one, and he congratulates his grandson Lucerys on being confirmed as Lord of the Tides. And we know that Lucerys is like kind of nervous about this whole thing. And then I think it's Baela or Rhaena, whichever one of his cousins he's now engaged to, just turns to him and says, "You'll be great." Like it's just like one of those like funny little throwaway lines, like yeah, you'll do it, honey. I believe in you. Like he's a 12-year-old kid who's shown like no promise,
and they're just betrothed. It's like yeah.
Anyway, all right. I have a few other things here, but what else about this dinner scene jumped out to you?
I truly believe at this point that Alicent is genuine. When she says you'll be a great queen, I think she really means it in that moment, because I think she's almost, after the scene in the hall, I think she's kind of given up a little bit. That Vaemond is dead. That was her way to secure Driftmark. I think at this point she begins to finally come to grips with Rhaenyra being the queen. At least that's how I take it. And then that's why the final scene of this episode pisses me off so much, because we have this moment of rekindling friendship. Rhaenyra even says, Alicent says, "Oh, I'm sorry you have to leave so quickly," after the fight that breaks out. And then Rhaenyra says, "It's okay, I'll come back on Dragonback and we can spend a few days together." All of that is genuine to me. And then you have, like, the whole point of this dinner was to bring the family together, and it kind of works. But then Viserys just tears the family apart like 2 hours later or whatever it is when he's on his deathbed. But
yeah,
it's just very ironic.
Yeah, it's tragic. I tend to agree with you. I think Alicent was being genuine in those moments. And one of the things I noticed, especially earlier in this episode, when she's walking around with that gigantic Faith of the Seven necklace, and she's sitting at the head of the council, her hair is up in a very kind of tight do. And then in the dinner scene, it's down. It's her hair is down again. And you kind of, I think that was just a visual way. And she has a necklace, but it's smaller. I think it's also another Faith of the Seven, but it's a smaller necklace. And I think that's just a visual cue that she's more relaxed. She's more genuine, as we're saying here.
She's literally letting her hair down.
She's literally letting her hair down. Yeah. But as you said, that all kind of gets tossed to shit. Now I wonder here, and I have another observation, which is, well, this all gets blown up when Aemond makes a toast to the strong boys, bringing up the whole bastardry thing again. And what seemingly prompts this is a roasted pig is placed right in front of Aemond. And I'm wondering if this was Otto. You remember earlier in the episode when Viserys is getting his wounds tended to and Otto is there and he says, "Hey, Otto, arrange a dinner. My whole family's here. I want you to arrange a dinner." So we know Otto put the dinner together. I bet he set the menu, and he may have, set Aemond here and instructed the people to deliver this pig in front of Aemond.
Because it's going to set him off.
It's going to set him off. And he's like looking right at Lucerys, right? And that's the guy who put your eye out. He taunted you with the pig. Here's, toast. And then everything is shattered.
So Aemond's characterization. That's why I want more development of him. Because apparently they haven't seen each other in 6 years. So, I mean, personally, someone I've been mad at for 6 years, if I ran into them again, I don't know if I would be as mad as I was. And like, clearly, he's grown as a sword master. He has Vagar, a dragon. He's doing pretty well in King's Landing. Like, what threat does he have besides like royal lineage to the throne of his nephews? So
yeah, you want like the training scene, right, where he's like working out in the yard. There's like a picture of Lucerys up there, and he's like staring at it when he's doing push-ups, or like, how is this fire being fueled 6 years later when he even said himself, like, "Mother, it was a worthy trade," right? Like, I lost an eye, but I gained a dragon, right? Like, to a certain extent, okay, that indicates that you're okay.
You're cool with it, yeah,
and now you get to be cool Aemond One Eye. Right? It hasn't impacted your ability to swing a sword with the best of them. So yeah, where's it coming from?
It just seems out of place.
Yeah. I think we're just supposed to understand
that he just hates them.
Yeah, that he's just like, because maybe they set it up a little bit with this line when he and Kristen are sparring in the yard and he beats Kristen Cole and Cole says, "You'll be winning tourneys in no time," and he's like, "I don't give a shit about tourneys," right? And you get the sense that, okay, this is the same serious kid that we saw 6 years ago, but now he's a serious and dangerous man who holds a grudge, right? But also, like, maybe seemingly can't control his emotions when the pig is delivered in front of him. So he's kind of, and I mean,
still childish,
and to be, I think there's. What we're supposed to get a sense of is that Daemon and Aemond are very similar. Where
yes, and I love that ending scene where
the little confrontation. Yeah,
Daemon just kind of walks up to him. Like, that'd be a good fight. I think Daemon would fucking kick his ass.
Well, I don't want to spoil things for you.
Yeah, please don't. Yeah, that was a great scene. Like that confrontation, and the whole dinner scene, I guess, was good. One of the things that makes the end of this episode so heartbreaking is that you do have that feeling at the end of the dinner with the conversation between Alicent and Rhaenyra that things might be resolved, and that this friendship may return, and then they just leave you with that gut punch of Aegon is the heir.
I think we are going to get a little bit more of the Alicent and her conflict over supporting Aegon in line with what she believed Viserys' wishes were versus her sentiments, her regard for Rhaenyra, and what we think are her genuine feelings. I think we're going to get some of that, but it's going to be very quickly made obvious that there are other people, her father, people on the council, who are not going to be inhibited by those same feelings.
Yeah.
And there is no conflict for them. It's no, we're Team Aegon. We're Team Green. Because we get a little hint of that with whichever one of the Lannister douches is on the council. And I think the new Lord of Law, there seems to be a little bit of a separation, right? There's factions on the council with Beesbury, the old dude, Master of Coin, and the Grand Maester. But I'm excited to rewatch 9 and 10. It's been a while, and things get serious.
It has legit been since the first time I watched them.
All right, here we go.
which is like over a year ago.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you for listening to episode 76 in Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things, covering episodes 7 and 8 of season 1 of House of the Dragon. Next episode, we will cover the final 2, episodes 9 and 10 in House of the Dragon season 1 as we prepare for the premiere House of the Dragon season 2. After that, we'll have a Mead update, and then Sean and I will announce any additional episodes that we have before House of the Dragon Season 2 premieres mid-June. Thank you for listening. You can catch us on Facebook, Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things, Elves, Rings, Nerdy Things at gmail.com. Write us if you want a sticker. We have them. Sean will send them to you along with a lock of his beard hair and...
That is not happening, but poetry and some cologne. That's
poetry and cologne. He'll even put on some lipstick and kiss the envelope.
Sure, I'll do that.
Okay. Bye, everybody.